him a chance just to cool off. But thank you for joining us. Tell us about the weekend in Austin, and what do we make out of both programs?
Really unexpected, Paul. I went there expecting to watch a blowout, and it clearly wasn't that. And, the fact that a couple of glaring issues, or I would say big questions we had going into the season about Alabama, offensive line, receiver, were the two areas that were noticeably hurting them in that game. Now, if you're looking at it more glass half full, despite committing 15 penalties, despite not Bryce Young having thrown for 70 yards through three quarters, he ends up rallying them to the win, and in very what we've come to expect from Bryce Young, very Superman type plays on those last two drives. So, does it make me a little bit concerned about Alabama? Sure. But I feel like after this 14-year run of dominance by Nick Saban, I mean, what does that mean? They're going to go 12-1 instead of 13-0? I'm not jumping on the panic button just yet.
And that's fully understandable, and anybody who did would be foolish and has been proven wrong many, many times. But we've had some people in here giving opinions, and you were there, so you have one as well, Stewart, that we are so used to seeing dominant players on Alabama get through situations like this with ease. This was not really with ease. This took a lot of things that had to happen correctly. Is the talent gap closing? Is Alabama moving Georgia off the table for this time being, but has Alabama come back to the pack?
Well, I'm not ready to say that yet. It's certainly, like I said before, there's a couple, like for instance, wide receiver, nobody has really stepped up there yet, and we've really taken for granted right over the last 5 or so years, Alabama was loaded at receiver. I mean, there was one year where they had 4 first-rounders in the same position room. And then last year, obviously, a lot of those guys left, but Jamison Williams came in. It does not appear through 2 games that there is a Jamison Williams in that receiving corps. There were high hopes for Jermaine Burton, who transferred in from Georgia. He was a non-factor in that game. I know there's the transfer from Louisville who hasn't played yet. Maybe that's a help, but there hasn't been a dominant position. So if you're going to say, are they falling back to the pack a little, it would seem that way at that one position. But across the board, I'm not ready to go there yet by any means.
Well,
I think maybe one curious
Stewart,
thing
if you're not ready, I'm not trying to make you go anywhere you don't want to go, but then what's the explanation for Saturday?
I think, honestly, when does a Nick Saban team commit 15 penalties?
I don't know. That's what we've been trying to figure out since Saturday. You were there. Tell us.
Well, I think the most puzzling part, and I was just going to say this, Paul, is Will Anderson, who last year I thought should have won the Heisman, you have not heard his name mentioned much in either of the first 2 games. He did have a pretty critical tackle late in the game, and he was one of the ones committing, lined up in the neutral zone type penalties. It was really astounding to watch their defense commit that many penalties. So is that a sign of things to come? Is this just like an uncharacteristically undisciplined Nick Saban team, or was it a one-time thing due to playing in the heat or the humidity, or that was kind of the Super Bowl for Texas, maybe not necessarily for Alabama? We'll see. I think we'll find out more about that over the next few weeks.
But Stewart, it wasn't a one-time thing. We saw this last year at Florida. We saw it at A&M. We saw it at Auburn. So why are we all just acting like we haven't seen this before?
You mean in terms of the close calls?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. I would be more concerned about it if there wasn't that demolition of Georgia in the SEC championship game thrown in between. So we know that's still in there. But, yeah, you're right. I mean, last year, look, Nick Saban himself referred to last year as a rebuilding year, and they still got the national championship game. People think, oh, he's being overdramatic about that. Well, that team I saw out there against Texas looked like they're in a bit of rebuilding mode, which is strange to say because – I think coming into the season, they've got the Heisman Trophy winner quarterback. They've got possibly the number 1 pick in the draft at linebacker. They're going to go out and smoke people. And then we found out in this game, no, actually, they still have some things that they're either still working on or possibly don't have an answer to. I mean, I know this. If they're counting on Jamar Gibbs to be the leading pass catcher at every game, that's not a formula to win the national championship.
So we don't know about that, and I think that's fair. Because we know that ultimately Nick Saban has wiggled his way out of all these problems. Which brings us to Jimbo Fisher, Stewart. He has not wiggled his way out of these problems. They keep piling up in spite of a $100 million contract and probably more than $85 million of buyout. So what do we make out of what we saw last week, and how much importance should be put on every one of these games moving forward, including Miami?
What was so jarring about that game, Paul, is this was not a 15 penalty circumstance. This was not some crazy play, some 5 turnovers. This was Appalachian State lined up and whipped Texas A&M at the line of scrimmage. For all those 5 stars, for all those highly ranked recruiting classes, they scored 1 offensive touchdown against a team from the Sun Belt, a good Sun Belt team. But come on, you're supposed to be beating those teams by 3 touchdowns if you're going to be the kind of program A&M aspires to be. So, I think this was a real wake-up call moment for A&M and A&M fans who, to this point, frankly, have been all in on Jimbo, regardless of whether he goes 8-4 or whatnot, because he's bringing in the recruits, because the defenses are really good, et cetera. But the offense, other than maybe that year with Kellen Mond was a senior, has been very underwhelming, and this was truly alarming because Haynes King, I thought Max Johnson would win the job, but I wasn't there in practice. Haynes King won that job for a reason, and he did not look like the answer at quarterback. So does that mean that he picked the wrong guy, or that he's actually the best option? And if he is, boy, they could be in trouble this year.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus right now.